Hello and welcome to episode 21 of the Teachers Tea Time podcast. My name is Mark and I hope you're doing well. This podcast is about, by and for anyone who has ever had anything to do with schools and education. That's probably almost everybody. Topics and content in this podcast are listener generated. They come from listeners just like yourself. We are proud to be a member of Edjacent, a design collaborative made up of educators who dream of a better world for our students and their teachers. Learn more at edjacent.org. I have a mug of tea ready, so let's sit back, relax, and get on with the show. In today's episode, I welcome back previous guest, and now, because it's her second episode with us, friend of the podcast, Meghan Raftery. Meghan is the Chief Design Officer of the Edjacent Collaborative. Edjacent's emphasis on placing value in teachers' stories and improving education on a personal and community level aligned with mine in such a strong way that it was a no-brainer that the Teachers Tea Time podcast would feature Edjacent content, and Edjacent would showcase our little podcast. As such, and to celebrate our ongoing alignment with the values of Edjacent Collaborative, I asked Meghan back onto the show to tell us exactly what Edjacent is all about.
So we have Meghan Raftery is back with us. She's a podcast regular, it's her second time on the podcast. And the thing is, we've talked a lot about Edjacent, and I talk about it in my preamble, but we really want to know more about what Edjacent is. We say it's a design collaborative, but there's a lot more to it than that. So I've asked Meghan to come and talk to us and tell us more. So Meghan, welcome. Good to see you. And really, I want us to find out, what is Edjacent?
So Edjacent is becoming something right now, which is an exciting place to be. So really, Edjacent is, like you said, a design collaborative, and its purpose is to connect teachers who think deeply about education to one another to see what they can produce. So in some cases, it's a membership organization. In some ways, it's the beginnings of a bunch of people kind of living out their dream outside of the public education space.
Awesome. So how does that look when we come to work with teachers or educators, or even the folks that are related to education?
Yeah. So our primary focus is to help those educators kind of define who they are as a teacher. So regardless of what role they're in right now, we consider them to be teachers, and we want them to be able to articulate what it is that made them be a teacher and what they have in terms of wisdom to offer to this larger community of educators. We kind of imagine a world where educators define their sense of purpose more like medicine, in that I'm a doctor, I'm a teacher, not I'm a third grade teacher at Johnson Elementary School in, Smithfield, Illinois, or whatever else it might be. So in taking them from their job to their profession is really our goal. And we hope that by doing that, we'll really advance that public education system as a whole by kind of elevating the wisdom of each of these individual people who contribute.
That's really powerful work, particularly when we think about how, teachers are often professionally developed in ways that they may not want to be professionally developed. So I know one of the phrases we use in our conversation, we say, we want teachers to be self-authors. So what does that really mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so authoring basically means, and probably a lot of your listeners can relate to this because they already are self-authoring. And that's a hard word to say, self-authoring with the F-T-H. But the point is that you basically define your own destiny as a teacher. You are the one who decides how you're going to grow and how you're going to connect to others and what you want to learn and how you'll go about learning. So these tend to be sometimes people who are rebels in their schools, who kind of do their own thing in the context of the rules. They're people who stretch their job description to the max and say, okay, you said this, I think your intention was this, so I'm going to invent this new way of doing it. But oftentimes it's also incredibly compliant educators who are very mission driven, and they find that the mission that they have internally is not well matched by the system that they're in. And they dream of that system changing, and they want to be part of that. But they also are very loyal and very rule following and very committed to the actual institution that they work for. So we're helping those people to kind of see that the moral compass of an educator is much more a values-based kind of a compass, but you work in a system that forgets sometimes what those values are, or those are not consistently held values by the system. The system itself and the people working in it may have very different values. So we're trying to teach people that the compass is internal and that they can work towards that. And that is what it actually means to be a professional educator, is to follow that compass. And regardless of what your job is asking you to do, you feel committed at a higher level of purpose. So we think of self-authors as people who can say, here's what I have to offer out into the educational community. And it's so important that I don't let that stay inside me. It needs to be out there where others can benefit from it. And I'm going to do that on my own terms. And your own terms are operating inside the Edjacent platform.
Cool. So, this idea of being, we're going to be a good professional, and being a good professional educator means that I'm doing what's best for my students and myself and my family, and then developing my skills in a way that's going to benefit us all and add value. So what does Edjacent do that's different to what's already out there for a classroom teacher or someone who is in a position of responsibility or working with young people or any of those sort of professional roles?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we kind of have two different ways that people can be involved in Edjacent. Somebody can be a member, and a member is basically walking their way slowly through a system of defining who they are as an educator and then sharing that story with others. And then figuring out how that story can draw in an audience and help some people. And then from there, if they're interested, taking an entrepreneurship path where they start to say, how can I monetize that wisdom and actually make that part of my job, what I do for a living, through coaching and offering courses and things like that. So members kind of slowly walk their way through that process, supported by coaches and materials and resources that kind of get them where they want to go. What is their goal? Whether that's to love my job more, or to get the promotion I've been seeking, or to get that advanced degree that I wanted, or to start my own business. They kind of work their way through that pathway. At this point, we also have founders of Edjacent, and these are people who are really ready to start thinking about what does it look like to offer that content right now to people. These are the people who will become our coaches and the people who will offer the courses that kind of say, we're offering something, a deep level of wisdom that's not the latest buzz, that's not kind of standardized and mass produced. It's very custom and it's very personal. It's based on the stories of the self-author and the person that they're trying to help. A relationship is developed, and that relationship is not based on chance. It's not just that you both ended up in the same classroom, in the same hallway, and now you're buddies. It's something that we've kind of developed and really custom selected who matches with who and what work should they be doing together.
So in a way, we're kind of we're talking about offering professional coaching in the ways you would see in other industries, where people will work alongside that individual to help them further the next step in their profession, and that could be within their current context or without their current context.
Yeah, and the word adjacent is important to us. It kind of defines our mission in a way. It comes from the expression, the adjacent possible, which is basically a theory that says when you develop an innovation alongside an existing structure, the existing structure can innovate because the innovation exists. So our hope is that by putting our organization alongside existing systems, we're challenging and changing those systems. So that means putting people together in meaningful ways that then influences whatever it is they're trying to do in their personal life, their professional life. If this exists, it empowers them to do different things, better things in their daily life.
So it's a really good way of actually making your work as a teacher meaningful, having effect on the systems and the people you work with, and being a change agent without actually being monstrously disruptive, if you don't want to be. Which I think is quite a novel way of looking at what we do in education, because too often what we do is compliance and following rules and preserving the status quo. So this is a way of making change without ripping everything up and throwing out the book and burning it all down at the beginning.
Yeah, you hear a lot of studies that talk about collective efficacy as the primary driver for change in a school and the largest impact on student achievement. But collective efficacy in school systems happens by chance a lot of the times. So what we're kind of hypothesizing is that our self-authoring contributors in Edjacent are developing a high level of self-efficacy where they feel like their actions have an impact, where they feel like the things that they do on a daily basis are making a difference. And from having a group of people who feel that way, you will develop a collective of people who feel that way. And then we feel that that collective can be incredibly powerful from an advocacy perspective, or even just simply existing to help people to see what's possible. And then that hopefully will challenge what is being done in those systems that are kind of on autopilot, that need to be pushed on a little bit, but you're not doing it aggressively. You're doing it joyfully, and you're doing it by sharing this really optimistic view of what's possible from a group of people who just feel really good about the work they're doing. And so they're challenging, but they're not doing it in a subversive way. They're not doing it in an angry way. They're doing it in a, we've proved what's possible, and now that can stretch the imagination of a system that doesn't have a lot of imagination.
Which is great. But here's the thing. I mean, we have professional organizations within education. We have unions, we have academic organizations, scholastic organizations. Teachers can belong to a lot of groups. What would make becoming a member of Edjacent, a different experience? How is what we do and what we do with our members different to, say, me joining, making sure I'm an active member of my professional association, or I'm a member of a content group that looks at how we teach better? What's different about us?
Yeah. I don't know about you, Mark, but I belong to quite a few professional organizations where I'm not sure what I'm paying for. So one of the things that's really important to us is we want to be really crystal clear that when people invest in Edjacent as a member or a founder, that we expect that the money they pay in will come back to them tenfold. So there's a monetization structure here where we feel like educators have a valuable intellectual property that they give away for free all the time, even when they join one of those professional organizations where there's an expectation that they're joining a committee, or that they're just putting their dollars towards something that they can't see because it's so large that they don't know what it's going to. What we feel really strongly about is that when people give us money in Edjacent, that is their money, that they're actually getting it back. So there's an extensive revenue sharing that happens where we believe that individuals contributing should also get back a portion of the collective value of the organization, but that gives them an increasing level of voice in the organization where they can shape what's happening. And then we're also simulating at the macro level with the organization what we want people to be doing at the micro level with their own kind of personal brand. So as we define what Edjacent is, people are also defining who they are in the system. As we create structures for doing courses, our individual authors are also making courses. And so there's this kind of larger picture and a storytelling so that our organization is made up mostly of individual people and pieces versus the organization being a person in and of itself. So the organization isn't the point. The point is each of those individuals, which then collectively make who we are. Instead of it being who we are, would you like to join us? That's the opposite look of what we're trying to create. Cool.
So, so I'm thinking, we're kind of like a teachers pay teachers that does a lot of talking, or is that off base?
I think that at its most simple level, like the most tangible of what we're doing now, I think so. I think what we're trying to say is that our product, instead of being a really pretty chevron PDF that you can cut out and laminate, our product is wisdom. Our product is the collective knowledge that the individuals in our organization have to offer. So from the person who has dedicated their free time to understanding social emotional learning of teenagers who are in a correctional facility, we can all gain information from that person's deep wisdom that is important to us growing as a profession, but also allows that teacher who has that wisdom to say, here's what I've gained and I would like to give it back to this collective. So there's this back and forth that teachers pay teachers is definitely an economic structure where your purpose is to say, I've made this, now pay me. Ours is much more, I've learned this, now pay me to learn it too, so that we can collectively grow our knowledge more than save ourselves time on lesson planning.
Absolutely. Oh, that's awesome. So let's say someone's interested in knowing more about Edjacent. Maybe they're not ready for membership yet. They just want to find out more about what we do and what we talk about and the way things are. What should someone do?
The most important thing is to sign up for our mailing list, because our mailing list is going to give you information about meetings, and meetings are open to members. So what we want to be able to do is explain to you what membership will gain you, and then we want you to come to our meetings. We also publicly record and share those meetings, so you can also take a look at a meeting to see if that's something that's worth finding out more. You can also message Mark or I directly at Meghan@edjacent.org or Mark@edjacent.org to have a back and forth conversation. At this point, we're small enough that those personal conversations matter a great deal to us, both because we want you to be successful, but also because every person we talk to is teaching us who might use the system. Why are they coming and why aren't they? So right now, that's the best way. We do hope within the next couple months to have a public facing kind of portal where people can go learn more, but then also quickly, as they become members, they enter this valuable membership space where there's a plethora of resources. And as they become a member, one of the first things they get is a free coaching session. So they'd speak person to person with one of our founders to start to say, why are you here? What does it look like for you to contribute? What do you want to gain from this space? So that your experience is custom, tailored, personalized from the day that you join.
So ultimately, if they can get in touch with us, email, get onto our mailing list, which I'm going to have in the show notes of the podcast. And if people join, then what they're going to get is some bespoke, because I love that word, bespoke coaching based around the needs of the individual educator, and hopefully pushing them towards whatever their personal and professional goals are going to be.
Yeah, and we believe that this doesn't exist elsewhere. We really think that what we're creating is something pretty revolutionary in terms of self-actualization for educators. We really want to create a space for educators who are at the highest levels of their capacity to really figure out what am I doing here? What is my purpose? What's my legacy? How am I going to be my authentic self in whatever role that I'm in? And the easiest thing to do is to start a relationship with Edjacent as an organization, but also with you and me, Meghan and Mark, right now, because we're the ones who are kind of matchmaking, I guess, with the greater good of who are all the people who are in this space.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think this is timely as well, because, we've gone through, hopefully we're coming out of the other side of this global pandemic. Teachers have been the heroes and the villains of the piece. If you read things in the news and listen to people out on the, in the public zeitgeist, we're great because we've switched to no time at all to switch the way we deliver on instruction, but schools must be open to support the economy, and teachers are lazy, but teachers are heroes. And it is hard being an educator right now. It's hard, and it's hard to think sometimes to say, what's my purpose and where do I want to go? And I think that's part of the job that we do with folks, and we've done with some of our founders already, is really have them sort of think about, well, what am I doing, and where am I going with what I want to do, and what do I want to do next, and how do I make a difference? And I think in all cases, and then in the research I've done on professional development and what works well with educators, is knowing where you've come from and knowing where you want to go is key to your satisfaction, and the balance between how hard you work and how smart you work, and what sense of reward you get from that, whether it's monetarily or just sort of feeling good about your job. And I think
and so much of what you just described, this kind of pandemic teaching, is happening to teachers. What we're trying to say is that on the other side of this learning experience that we've all just had, what do you want to do? You are a person in a system right now that defines you as teacher, and that means something in people's minds. Well, what do you want it to mean? Because now you can kind of put that out there into the world and say, this is who I want to be, and this is how I'm going to kind of move what happens next in my career the way that I want to. I want to be the driver and not the passenger in that experience. And we really believe that if we can take excellent educators and put them in that position, we can really shape what schooling looks like post-pandemic in a way that is not in our control right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Edjacent's more than just a talking shop. It's more than just a monetary scheme. It's more than just a design collaborative. It really is, for me, I'm seeing it as a way for everybody involved in education to look, reflect, and truly make a difference in the work that they do. And for a lot of us, that's why we do this work, because we want to make a difference. And we're just sometimes not always given the tools or the opportunity to do so. And I think spending that time to help us do that is going to be really valuable. Any last messages before we sign off on this little short podcast?
I think mostly just that if you want to be there, we want to have you there. That's pretty much the underlying, I think, philosophy of Edjacent, is that we're a collective made up of each of the individual people who are there. And we want you to know that somebody understands that you have value. We don't know you yet, but we do know that if you've invested deeply in the work of being an educator, you should be part of our collaborative. That's really what it comes down to. I have a lot of conversations with people who say, I don't know, am I right for this? Should I be in this space? Of course you should. If you have wisdom that is valuable beyond your own personal story, and if you've been teaching for more than 11 minutes, you have that. We want to know what you have to offer, and we want to give you an audience. We want to say, like, anybody who's had a mentoring experience or led professional development, you get this kind of high from that experience that says, I really kind of felt that what I put in came back to me in this experience. We want to kind of simulate that over and over and over again. And everybody is welcome. Really, what we want to do is show the world what educators are capable of and how that's been kind of trapped inside them for, honestly, generations, that we'd like to just put out into a public space and say, here's what's possible. So if you don't even know why you might join something like this, if you feel drawn to it just from a philosophical perspective, we'll help you tell your story. We'll help you find an audience. That's the point of the organization. Your job is just to be you and to give what you have out to the world. So that's kind of what we hope people, when they come across us, that feels really good to them. And that's something that they want to do, whether they're a first-year teacher or they're retired or they left traditional education years ago, but they still have parts of them that want to come back, or even pre-service teachers. There's an ethos here that I think is attractive to people who are attracted to teaching.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much for giving up time. And it's always good for us to chat about Edjacent, because I think it's been a brilliant project so far. And we're really moving in amazing directions. Hopefully people will, get in touch with both of us. That's, Meghan at edjacent.org and Mark at edjacent.org, and take a look at our site and, see what we've got to offer. All be down in the show notes. And I'm just really excited about where this project is going.
Yeah, I think it's going places we can't even imagine yet. And that's the entire point. So, we want to do that over and over again. So thanks.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you again to Meghan for joining us on the show and explaining her vision for Edjacent. If you want to know more, you can check out the Edjacent website on www.edjacent.org or email Meghan directly. Her address is meghan@edjacent.org. She's also active on Twitter at MEG5HAN. All of those will be in the show notes to this episode. I'm really excited about what Edjacent can offer educators at all levels in their careers, from pre-service teachers through to retirees. It is a tough time to be in education, and the work of everyone in school communities is so important right now. So groups like Edjacent, which aim to provide a bespoke experience centred on the needs of the educator, are going to play an important role moving forward. I'm so happy that the Teachers Tea Time podcast will be a part of this process, so expect to hear more educator stories in future episodes. Until then, that was episode 21 of the Teachers Tea Time podcast. This podcast is a proud member of Edjacent, a design collaborative made up of educators who dream of a better world for our students and their teachers. We create, write, talk, teach, and learn about the things that matter most in education. To find out more, point your browser to www.edjacent.org. That's www.edjacent.org. For me, it's the stories of teachers, students, and school communities that matter. As such, this podcast is only possible with the help and support of its listeners. Please leave positive reviews wherever you are able. If you're an iTunes or Spotify subscriber, leaving a good review can really help our visibility. Also, please don't keep this podcast to yourself. Tell your friends to subscribe and listen too. One thing we all have in common is that we've all been to school. So if you'd like to contribute to the pod in any way, if you have a story to share, long, short, tragic or comic, if you have comments to make about the podcast, or just want to say hi, you can send an email to teachersteatimepod@gmail.com. Or, alternatively, you can send emails to mark@edjacent.org. I like to read what you have to say. If social media is your thing, you can follow me on Twitter @MarkDearcop. You can find our contact information, copies of the show notes, and you can download previous episodes of the podcast at www.teachersteatimepod.com. The podcast artwork was created by Phaedra. Opening and closing music is by Brian Boyko. It's been my pleasure to be your host today. Thank you for listening.